The Committee on Foreign Affairs will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess of the committee at any point, and all members will have 5 days to submit statements, extraneous material, and questions for the record, subject to the length limitation in the rules. To insert something into the record, please have your staff email the previously mentioned address or contact full committee staff. As a reminder to members, please keep your video function on at all times, even when you're not recognized by the chair. Members are responsible for muting and unmuting themselves. Consistent with House rules, staff will only mute members as appropriate when they are not under recognition to eliminate background noise. I see that we have a quorum, and I now recognize myself for opening remarks. Pursuant to notice, the full committee meets today to examine the conflict in Ethiopia. I want to thank you and everyone for joining us today, and I'm honored to have Ambassador Robert Godick, who's the acting assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, and Ms. Sarah Charles, USAID's assistant to the administrator for the Bureau of Humanitarian Affairs, serve as our distinguished witnesses for this hearing on the conflict in Ethiopia. As we all know, the situation in Ethiopia and in the Tigray region in particular is dynamic and appears to be entering a new phase. We are reminded of this stark reality over the last 24 hours, when Tigrayan forces overtook the regional capital and the Ethiopian government called for humanitarian ceasefire. Now, I've been cautiously optimistic about this development, and I can only hope it opens the door to a peaceful resolution. However, I am hearing reports that the TPLF is threatening to enter Eritrea, which would be a clear and dangerous escalation in this conflict. I strongly condemn any efforts, I want to be clear, any efforts by the TPLF and any other armed group that would attempt to further escalate violence. We need to de-escalate the violence. We need a ceasefire. Only 1 week ago today, the Ethiopian government launched an airstrike against unarmed civilians at a market in Tigray. To make an outrageous situation worse, government forces and armed groups denied ambulances carrying the casualties of this attack passage to the medical facilities for hours. All parties to this conflict, are responsible for the unmitigated violence unfolding in Tigray, including Ethiopian and Eritrean forces, the TPLF, and Amhara regional forces. These parties are responsible for reprehensible acts, including extrajudicial killings, sexual and gender-based violence against women and children, torture, and forced disappearances. On the receiving end of this violence over the last 7 months are innocent, vulnerable civilians who have been rendered refugees or IDPs and are now facing a man-made famine. And I've heard reports of farmers being forced off their land and denied the opportunity to harvest their crops. And it's at a time when millions of people are facing acute hunger and malnutrition. Beyond Tigray, regional militia and armed groups in other Ethiopian regions, including Amhara and Oromo and Beni Shanku and Gumos, are also involved in ethnic violence that has killed hundreds of people and displaced thousands. But Tigray presents a particularly grave and insidious form of violence that constitute ethnic cleansing. As Secretary Blinken said here months ago, and the EU's Special Envoy for Ethiopia reiterated it in recent statements. What we are seeing unfold in Tigray bears the hallmarks of crimes against humanity, and quite possibly a genocide. And those responsible must be held accountable. And if this disaster is not abated by an inclusive national dialogue and a political settlement soon, we could witness one of our closest and most powerful allies in Africa march toward civil war and eventually a state collapse. Such an outcome would be catastrophic for Ethiopia's people and for the Horn of Africa. And that is why it is important that this administration and this Congress remain focused on this issue until a solution is found. Ethiopia has been a long-standing partner to the United States, and Prime Minister Abiy, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, represented promise and hope for a more unified country when he rose to power in 2018. Prospects for a durable peace in Ethiopia and its role as a responsible regional leader are now in question, as is Prime Minister Abiy's legacy. But we will not abandon our collective efforts to find a better outcome for Ethiopia's people. Other pressing matters further complicate dynamics in this volatile region. The decade-long negotiations over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam remain stalled, while tensions over regional border disputes continue to simmer. And I'm eager to hear what more the United States can do to support the AU and other multilateral institutions in their drive to solve these crises. And finally, I conclude by acknowledging Ethiopia's historic elections on June 21st. In addition to the clear and predictable security and logistics issues that arose, I agree with the administration's assessment. A process that disenfranchises constituents and opposition candidates cannot be considered free, fair, or credible. The United States will continue to champion the pursuit of true democracy for the people of Ethiopia. But I am unconvinced that these elections alone will correct the course Ethiopia is now on. Ultimately, this hearing and our engagement on this issue in general is not about picking sides, not at all. Our chief concern, our focus is for the people of Ethiopia and how the United States can help pave the path toward reconciliation, peace, and stability in Ethiopia. The gentleman yields back. And I think now all member questions have concluded. And I would like to close simply by first thanking our witnesses for your testimony today, taking your time in answering the questions, being very informative in those answers. It will help the members of this committee tremendously. And clearly the situation in Ethiopia is dire, but it's not insurmountable. This conflict, as we all know, has roots in a complicated history that started decades before the violence in Tigray, which erupted in November. But still, it is important for us in the United States to make our position clear. We will continue to press for accountability for all parties involved in human rights violations. That's something that we've got to be focused on, our values. We have taken the first step through visa restrictions and economic sanctions. And I understand we may be considering even further action. And as we enter this new phase of the conflict, I got to tell you, I am very concerned that an escalation of violence may create even more chaos and harm, even hurting and harming more innocent civilians. These fresh reports of potential for a cross-border conflict, I believe, require special attention in the immediate future, in the next coming days. And any move by the TPLF or other armed groups to further stoke the flames during this ceasefire will be strongly condemned by the United States of America and our allies in the international community. So, again, I can only hope that the ceasefire holds, which you have articulated here excellently, and that all parties make a good faith effort to settle this conflict. So let me be clear. That's what I'm trying to do here so that there's no confusion because I hear from all parties, that the Ethiopian government, now that the Ethiopian government has called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, it is indeed time to push for the full withdrawal of Ethiopian troops of Eritrean troops, from Ethiopia, unfettered access for humanitarian and medical workers, and negotiations where all parties to the conflict participate in good faith. This is the only pathway to peace. So if we have an opening, we should work together to find that solution. I again commend the administration for its work in this regard, further underscoring the U.S. commitment to Ethiopia's people. And let me say also that this committee, and the reason why I thought that it would be important for us to have a full committee hearing on this matter, is that we're not going to be asleep on what's taking place. We've had tragedies. I know when I first came into office, there was no real conversation in Congress about Rwanda. That's not going to take place in this Congress, in this committee, under my watch. We're going to stay focused on this. We're going to speak out about it. We're going to work with the administration to do something about it. We're not going to allow people, innocent women, children, men, civilians, just trying to live a decent life, starved. That should not happen on this planet or on that continent ever again. And we could never be silent on that. For example, the words, I close on this, the words of Dr. King always rings in my ears. We won't remember the people who are out to do bad, but we will remember our friends who were silent. We won't be silent. We're going to stand up for our values and for the sake of human life. So I want to thank all of the members. We had great participation by all of the members of this committee today. I want to thank Ranking Member McCall. He's been a true partner in this. This has not been, and this is not a Democratic or Republican issue. It is an issue for all of us. And we've got to let the American people know what's taking place so that we can stand together to prevent this tragedy that is continuing in the country of Ethiopia. And with that, this hearing is now adjourned.